Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I've got something special just for you. Because this deck is as unique as it is absolutely brutal. There are no other decks out there built like this one, and this deck is most definitely not for the faint of heart. Or maybe more so, I should say, for playgroups and LGSs that aren't quite ready for a deck like this one. So before we jump into this deck and talk about what exactly this deck wants to do, a quick disclaimer. I am not kidding when I'm saying that this deck is incredibly brutal. I mean, this deck could most definitely lose you some friends. Unless your playgroup is okay with these type of decks, do not just surprise them with this deck, because they won't be too happy with you. And obviously the same goes if you played in LGS as well. Make sure you have those conversations ahead of time. Regardless, although this deck is incredibly brutal, it's also incredibly budget friendly, because every single card in the 99 of this deck is less than $1. And yeah, even with that restriction, we can do some incredible and some incredibly brutal things. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So though the commander for this deck is Sliver Overlord, it is most definitely not a Sliver tribal deck. In fact, aside from the commander, there are exactly 0 Slivers in this deck. But believe me, there's a reason that Sliver Overlord is the commander for this deck. It's a 7/7 Sliver mutant that costs white, blue, black, red, green. By paying 3, you search your library for a Sliver card, reveal that card and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. And by paying 3, you gain control of target Sliver. So Sliver Overlord is a fantastic Sliver commander because, yeah, you can just pay 3 mana and go tutor for whatever Sliver you want. And that's exactly what most Sliver Overlord decks are built around. But again, like I said, we have exactly 0 Slivers in this deck. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have anything that we can tutor for, though. In fact, we have some very powerful things that we can tutor for. And again, whereas most Sliver Overlord decks are utilizing mostly that first ability and not so much the second, unless their playgroup has a lot of Sliver tribal decks out there, we're going to be utilizing both of these abilities. And we're going to be utilizing them a lot more efficiently than what you see on this card. And remember how I said that this deck is unique? Well, it's actually one of a kind, according to EDH Rec, I should say. Because out of the 1,897 Sliver Overlord decks out there, only 45 of them utilize this next card I'm gonna bring up. And exactly 0 of those decks utilize it in the way that I do. And that card would be Zirda the Dawnwaker. That's right, this Sliver Overlord deck has a companion, and it's Zirda the Dawnwaker. Although 45 Sliver Overlord decks utilize Zirda in the deck, they utilize it in the 99, not as the companion. Now, why exactly am I utilizing this way and others have not in the past? Well, let's talk about that after we talk about what this card does. Zirda the Dawnwaker is a 3/3 elemental fox that costs 1 Boros. It has companion. Each permanent card in your starting deck has an activated ability. Abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. And by paying 1 and tapping it, target creature can't block this turn. So Zirda actually has a very restrictive companion requirement. In fact, out of all the companions, according to EDH Rec, Zirda is the least used as a companion with just 58 decks in total. Because that restriction can be so limiting that you're not willing to give that up to have this as your companion. Especially for a Sliver tribal commander. Because actually there are only 5 Slivers in total that meet Zirda's requirements to be a permanent that has an activated ability. The way that most Slivers are worded, they actually don't have the activated ability themselves, they're giving it to all Slivers, therefore they don't count when it comes to Zerda. So yeah, there's a reason that Zerda is not a companion for any Sliver tribal decks out there because, yeah, if you pick Sliver Overlord as your commander, you've got 4 Slivers to pick from for that deck. Now, obviously, Zerda is still included in the 99 of some of those Sliver Overlord decks because, again, Zerda is incredible with Sliver Overlord. Again, Zerda has abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities, cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost 2 less than 1 mana. In other words, again, Sliver Overlord's abilities each cost 3 mana, but with this in play, each of them cost 1. So for just 1 mana, you've got a repeatable tutor for any Sliver card in your library. And then again, for just 1 mana, you can gain control of any Sliver on the board. And remember, Sliver Overlord isn't tapping when you do this, so you can do this as many times as you want. Now again, how useful is that if you're not playing against a Sliver tribal deck? Well, let me tell you about a fantastic card that isn't a Sliver, but it technically is a Sliver card. And that card, of course, would be the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Shields of Velisvel. This is a tribal instant shapeshifter, and it has Changeling, so this card is every creature type at all times. So yeah, this is a Sliver card in your deck that your commander can tutor for. And believe me, you definitely want to tutor for this one. For just a single white mana, creatures target player controls get +0/+1 and gain all creature types until end of turn. So it doesn't matter that your opponents aren't playing Sliver Tribal. This essentially says, no, you definitely are. You are playing Sliver Tribal. Well, and Dragon Tribal and all the other tribes. But yes, your creatures are Slivers. So once you've got Sliver Overlord and Zerda out, you for 1 mana tutor this up, cast this for 1 mana on an opponent, and have fun. Just by paying 2 mana in total, you have set yourself up now to just pay 1 mana to steal any creature that your opponent controls. And again, you can do that as many times as you want for as much mana as you have. This, in combination with your commander and Zerda, turns your commander into a, hey, pay 1 mana, steal whatever creature you want from an opponent's board. Yeah, there's a reason why I said this deck is brutal, and why I had a disclaimer to start the episode saying, please don't play this deck without actually thinking about it ahead of time and talking with your playgroup or those at your LGS. Yeah, mass stealing your opponent's creatures over and over again in this kind of a way can definitely tilt some players and lose you a lot of friends. And keep in mind that Sliver Overlord's ability doesn't say until end of turn. This is not a threaten effect, it's a mind control effect. The effect is permanent. Good luck to your opponents trying to do absolutely anything when you can just keep stealing their creatures for absolutely no effort. And again, you can do this consistently because you can tutor it up. And believe me, this is not a one-off effect. We've got plenty of ways to get this back so we can do it again, and again, and again. And on top of that, we also have some Changeling cards that we can tutor for that can help us out in different ways, though not nearly as effective, still pretty impactful. First up, there's a Meeboy Changeling, a 1/1 shapeshifter with Changeling, so again, this is a Sliver in our deck, and it has tap target creature gains all creature types until end of turn. So this is a repeatable, single target, hey, you're now a Sliver, and I'm gonna gain control of you for 1 mana. And then Blades of Velisvel is a tribal instant shapeshifter with Changeling that says up to 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 and gain all creature types until end of turn. And then Wings of Velisvel is a single target but still impactful in this deck. It says until end of turn, target creature has base power toughness 4/4, gains all creature types and gains flying. Again, the key to all of these cards is that they can change a creature or creatures into Slivers. Obviously, Shields of Velisvel is the best because it can just change someone's entire army into Slivers, and again, we've got ways to make sure that we can do that over and over again. So we can steal multiple players' armies, and even if players rebuild, well, we'll just steal their new creatures too. So of course, to make sure the fun keeps going, well, again, at least for us, we are going to be utilizing cards like Regrowth, Treasured Find, and Recollect. Each of these are very simple but incredibly effective cards that just say, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So if an opponent deals with Zerda, well, we get Zerda back, and then we get Zerda back into play to reduce our cost. Or of course, if we need to get Shields of Velisvel back, we do that too. Again, and again, and again. And of course, we are nowhere near done with our regrowth effects just yet, so we're going to be utilizing Down and Dirty, Naya Charm, and Dryad's Revival. The dirty half of Down and Dirty says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Naya Charm says choose one, it deals 3 damage to our creature, return target card from a graveyard to its owner's hand, or tap all creatures target player controls. And then Dryad's Revival says return target card from your graveyard to your hand, and it's got flashback for 4 in a green, so we can utilize it twice. Next up though, we've got Once in Future, which gets us 1 card back in our hand and 1 on top of our library, or both cards back into our hand if we use 3 green mana on the spell. And then Seeds of Renewal and Restock essentially do the exact same thing, getting us 2 cards back from our graveyard back to our hand. Speaking of which, there's Healing Technique, which has Demonstrate, and it's going to get us back a card from our graveyard to our hand, and we gain life equal to that card's mana value. And then All Sun's Dawn says for each color, return up to 1 target card of that color from your graveyard to your hand, exile All Sun's Dawn. And then Wildest Dreams can also get us back a lot of cards too. It says return X target cards from your graveyard to your hand, exile Wildest Dreams. Next up, Reconstruct History can get us back a lot of different cards. It says return up to 1 target artifact card, up to 1 target enchantment card, up to 1 target instant card, up to 1 target sorcery card, up to 1 target planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. And then You Happen Upon a Glade is more specific on what it can get us back, but it's also more flexible too. It says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle, or return target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Again, if say Zirda gets dealt with, we can get Zirda back, and if we don't need to, well, we can go get some lands to help us fix our mana. And speaking of getting Zirda back, we've got Unearth, which can actually just get Zirda right back into play. It says return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and on top of that, and keep note of this, it has cycling. Zirda does not specify the activated abilities of permanents, so yeah, our cycling gets reduced as well. So instead of this costing 2 to cycle, it only costs 1. But of course, we've got some even more impactful ways to draw a lot of cards. First up, we've got Kefnet the Mindful, Fairy Formation, and Shaman of the Great Hunt. Kefnet the Mindful has pay 3 and a blue, draw a card, then you may return a land you control to its owner's hand. Again, Zirda sees that activated ability and says, you know what, you should pay less for that, just pay 1 and a blue to do that. So this is basically a repeatable 2 mana draw card. Speaking of which, there's Fairy Formation, which says pay 3 and a blue, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying, draw a card. So now for that exact same amount of mana, we get a 1/1 flyer and we draw a card too. But a way to draw an absurd amount of cards all at once for not much mana at all is Shaman of the Great Hunt. It has Ferocious for 2 Simic, draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So yeah, pay Simic, and draw an absurd amount of cards. Again, this is going to count all the creatures that we're stealing as well, so have fun. Next up, there's Arcane Encyclopedia, which has pay 3 and tap, draw a card, and again with Zirda, it's going to be 1 and tap. Speaking of which, there's Lore Seeker Stone, which also has pay 3 and tap, but this is draw 3 cards, but this ability costs 1 more to activate for each card in your hand. So if we've got no cards in our hand, congratulations, 1 mana tap, draw 3 cards. And then Reconnaissance Mission says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and actually the only reason we can include this card in the deck is because it has cycling for 2, which is fantastic. So steal your opponent's creatures so they have no blockers, then swing with their creatures, hit them for a lot of damage, and draw a lot of cards. Sounds fun. Okay, well, at least for you it's fun. Maybe not your opponents. Next up, how about Book of Wrath, an artifact that costs 6 that has pay 2 life, draw a card. So Zirda's going to reduce this cost, so it's basically just a greed, but for any color of mana, not just black. And speaking of greed, Argol's Bloodfast is basically just that. It's going to be pay a black, pay 2 life, draw a card. On top of that, though, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you've got 5 or less life, you can transform it. And if you do, you transform it into Temple of Aclazance. It can tap for a black, or it can tap to sacrifice a creature, and you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. So now you can utilize your opponent's creatures as life gain fodder as well. Next up, we're also going to be utilizing cards like Oread of Mountain's Blaze, Merchant of the Veil, and Tectonic Reformation. Oread of Mountain's Blaze has pay 2 and a red, discard a card, draw a card, or in other words with Zirda, pay a red, rummage. Which is exactly what Merchant of the Veil does as well. And then Tectonic Reformation has each land card in your hand has cycling for red, and its cycling cost is 2. Next up, we even have some ramp cards that can help us with card draw as well, with Bonder's Ornament, Hedron Archive, and Dreamstone Hedron. Bonder's Ornament can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and we can pay 4 and tap it, and each player controls a permanent called Bonder's Ornament, which is probably just going to be us, gets to draw a card. And again, instead of that being 4, it is 2. And then Hedron Archive taps for colorless, and we can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards, and again, that's just going to cost us 1 to do. Dreamstone Hedron's essentially a bigger version of Hedron Archive. It can tap for 3, and again, we're just going to have to pay 1, though, to tap and sacrifice it to draw 3 cards. So, as always, make sure you thank Zirda for all those savings. Regardless, of course, we are nowhere near done with our ramping just yet, because you know what? Our opponents might have a lot of creatures, and we want to steal all of them. So next up, we're going to be running all 5 crystals from Mycoria. Each of them tap for 1 of 3 colors, and they each have cycling for 2, which again, thanks to Zerda, is 1. And speaking of cycling ramp cards, we've got Beneath the Sands and Migration Path. Beneath the Sands is going to get us 1 basic into play tapped, and Migration Path gets us 2, but again, each have cycling for 2, which again, thanks to Zerda, is 1. And then let's very quickly go through the rest of the ramp in this deck with Diligent Farmhand, Fauna Fertility, Search for Tomorrow, Rampant Growth, Explorer, Edge of Autumn, Harrow, Roiling Regrowth, Cultivate, Grow from the Ashes, Circuitous Route, and Vastwood Surge. Again, the more mana we have, the more creatures we can steal. Next up, we also have some removal spells with cycling as well with Wilt, Forsake the Worldly, and Sylvan Reclamation. Wilt's going to destroy target artifact or enchantment, Forsake the Worldly is going to exile target artifact or enchantment, and Sylvan Reclamation can exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. Next up, some more cycling removal cards with Barrier Breach and Dismantling Wave. Barrier Breach is going to exile up to 3 target enchantments. And actually, Dismantling Wave is a very interesting cycling card because it's one of the very few cycling cards that has a casting cost that's less than its cycling cost. If we cast it, for each opponent destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. But if we cycle it for 6 white, which again with Zerda is going to be 4 white, we destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Next up, there's Aether Gale though, which is a very efficient bounce spell. It's going to bounce 6 target non-land permanents back to their owner's hands. When it comes to our counter spells though, we even have some cycling ones as well with Miscalculation, Countervailing Winds, and Neutralize. Miscalculation is going to counter target spell unless its caster pays initial 2. Countervailing Wind is going to counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. And Neutralize is going to straight up counter target spell. And finally, we even have some utility cards that can really help us out in a lot of situations with Astral Drift and Bonds of Mortality. Astral Drift says whenever you cycle it or cycle another card while it's on the battlefield, you can exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under opponent's control at the beginning of the next end step. So whether we're cycling this or basically if this is in play and we cycle anything else, we can blink something. So this can be a fantastic way to protect our commander and Zerda. But keep in mind that if you blink one of your opponent's creatures that you stole, they're going to be getting it back, though of course you've got plenty of ways to steal it back if you want to. And then Bonds of Mortality has when it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and by paying a green, creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So even hexproof won't save your opponent's creatures from you stealing them thanks to this. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said that this deck is brutal. Now when it comes to the price of this deck, again like I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, every single card in this deck outside of the commander and the companion is less than $1. And actually, if you look at the total cost of this deck being $60.90, over half of that comes with the cost of the commander. Because yeah, the cheapest version of Sliver Overlord is $34.45. But yeah, again, the rest of the deck is basically $25. And also keep in mind that this cost actually includes the cost of basic lands at 10 cents a piece, so if you already have those, well, you got some more savings. And speaking of more savings, that estimated cost does not include heavily played or damaged cards, so if you're getting those on TCG Player, even more savings. Though, also keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include shipping, which might vary depending on where you live. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.